2021. And please let's all rise for with Pledge of Allegiance. I have a flag that I usually have up here, so I'm just trying to put that up. For those people at home. All right, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. And moving on to the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for our special meeting on June 28th, 2021. Can I get a motion?
Second.
All right, great. Any amendments or changes to the meeting draft? Minutes draft, no? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? No? Okay, great. Minutes passed. Number 3 on the agenda is the first Selectmen's update. So we'll go to that for the benefit of the people at home. I think, good news is Madison continues to experience a low COVID rate. In July, we've only had 2 active cases in town. 71% data as of the end of June is fully vaccinated. The lowest vaccination rate is in the age group of 12 to 15. So we're going to be trying to encourage additional vaccinations in that age group and offering different opportunities. The town is co-sponsoring with Griffin Health a vaccination clinic this Wednesday at the Surf Club. So families can arrive. They will be offering Pfizer, which is the vaccine for kids eligible in the 12 to 15 age group. And then they're also offering the J&J as well as the Moderna to encourage anybody who's not vaccinated. You can go to the Surf Club, you can park for free. And there'll be kind of a wellness clinic and some giveaways going on. I think we'll also have a food truck, or not a food truck, but light bowls will be there. So it's a great opportunity to come out and enjoy the sunshine, and hopefully sunshine, and get vaccinated. And then I know the school district is also planning a vaccination event for late July on site for students. That's all voluntary, obviously, with parental consent, and more information will be coming out about that vaccination event later this week. The Board of Selectmen is holding a public hearing on August 3rd at 6:30 p.m. or is it 6? That actually might be a typo. I think it's 6 o'clock p.m. and regarding the Island Avenue proposals. So just encourage everybody to attend that. We'll be sending out an alert with the link to information on where it's going to be held, confirming the time, because I think it was 6. That's a typo on my part. And also a link to the proposals that were submitted to the end of June for use of Island Avenue School. The town has also been working closely with the Coastal Resiliency Commission on investigating some of the infrastructure needs the town has due to climate change and flooding concerns. Obviously, after the recent rains, we saw some of the traditional hotspots in town flood. And the town really is trying to be proactive and put together a detailed plan that we would want to get funded and move forward on making infrastructure improvements to address some of the flooding concerns in these areas. There was a study done in 2016 that had made some initial recommendations. The town is now going to be updating that study, and then we're going to put a priority project list together to deal with that. So that'll be another part of the conversation here over the next couple of months about some of those projects. The other thing I know a lot of people have been talking about are the car theft issues in town. And I know the Board of Police Commissioners and the Madison Police Department has been working closely with citizen groups about addressing their concerns and maybe putting together some action items that the town could be taking to improve the situation. I've been talking frequently with the chair of the Police Commission. I know Al's attended the meeting that members of the public came. So we are talking and working together to put together some sort of mitigation strategy and public education plan in that area. So that is it for my updates, and I will turn it over to Selectmen comments and liaison reports. Anybody have a liaison report tonight?
I do not.
Yeah.
You just covered mine.
Great.
I do not either.
Okay, I know. Great. And it's not that we normally don't, it's just this is the summer and a lot of committees and commissions don't meet in July or August. They take time off. So so that's great. All right, so no reports there. Item number 5 is any citizen comments, Lauren? Do we have anybody, any members of the public that would like to make some comments tonight?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay, oh, yes,
Walter Lippman, I've lived in this town for 30 years. I'm going to direct some of this to you, and some of it is for the public in general. I have called your office many, many times, and I've never gotten a call back from you, which is something that I'm just curious about as to why you didn't call back. I did speak to you on one occasion, and that one occasion was, what are we going to do about the telephone poles downtown? And I suggested that, and this was early when you started, eminent domain. And you said, well, that costs a lot of money. Well, I think the fact that these telephone poles are still up there after this town spent a lot of money trying to redo downtown, and nothing has been done to, that I'm aware of, to relegate this situation in regards to poles. The other thing is, in this town, especially if you go up Route 79, there's a lot of dead trees and dead branches over 79. I know 79 is a state road, but because I've tried to talk to people in the state and they no longer have a superintendent down at the Guilford place, I thought coming from your office to the state might get some work done in regards to this. In particular, for example, there's a sign that says no passing. It's a yellow sign, it's triangular in shape. It's before Well Sweep on the left-hand side going north on 79. It would take about 5 minutes for somebody to do the trimming around there. Also, when you're coming down like from Clinton to Madison, there are 3 signs for exits for Madison that are obscured. Now, I'm not a merchant in town, I don't do business in town, but you don't want somebody on the highway all of a sudden jamming on their brakes because at the last minute they see a sign that says exit 61 Madison. And I thought this could come from the first selectman's office to the state to get something done. There are a number of signs also that are completely faded away, they no longer reflect, etc. Getting off on Route 6 on exit 61, there's a dead tree. It's been there since the storm last fall. And it looks when you're coming into Madison like a very rundown area. Why this tree hasn't been dealt with, I don't know. But if I had gotten a call back, maybe you could have called somebody in the state and gotten this tree removed. I think everybody that gets off at that exit can see this tree. It's dead, it's lying down. Also, one of the things I've noticed coming back from New Haven towards Madison, half of the lights are out on 95. Again, if I had been able to talk to your office and maybe get somebody in the state to do something about it, to me, it's like landing at an airport. If a pilot's landing at an airport without landing lights, it would be very, very similar. I don't understand why half these lights are out. But again, it's something that I thought that your office could communicate with the state and get it done. We're not talking here about capital expenditures. The other thing is, last fall, I went around with the head of Parks and Recreation, and we looked at different things. There are 3 signs in Madison that were painted by hand. They're not state signs, but they're nice signs. One's around a Route 80 circle. The other is just before you come into the Post Road on 79. The other is as you're coming down the Hammonasset connector. And they are white signs and they're with lettering, and all they need is a cleaning. And I talked to him about it at the time, and they're still moldy and not very appropriate looking. So I would hope that when citizens call, they get a call back and something can be done about some of these conditions that exist in town. In New Canaan or Darien, I'm not sure which one. In 1 week last year, 2 people were killed by falling trees. 2 in a town probably the size of Madison. There's plenty of dead stuff. At one time, I had suggested to the previous selectman that contact Yale Forestry School, and because I don't believe that we have a tree person anymore, and making arrangements with Yale Forestry to pick out trees that need to be done insofar as the danger to the community. Again, there's plenty of dead trees and plenty of dead limbs that can affect people.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, Walter, I appreciate it. Any other public comment? No, no one online, Lauren? No? Okay,
Nope.
great. Okay, so moving on to business, item number 6 is a presentation from Charlie Corso, excuse me, and Bill Porter on the American Legion Building Program. So I want to welcome all of you here today. I know you have a number of representatives. And they will be giving a presentation on the proposed renovation to their facility on Bradley Road. And so if you'd like to stand up here in front, and then that way when he gets the camera on you, the people at home can also see you giving the presentation. So, and Lauren's going to screen share it, so it'll pull it up, and just let her know when you need the slide move forward.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the Board of Selectmen for allowing us to speak this evening. My agenda will be short and to the point, and I hope you'll be attentive and sympathetic. Okay. As you can see, we need your help. That's what we've said. Our partnership with the town of Madison goes back more than 100 years. And when I say partnership, there's been a lot of trade-offs over the years between the American Legion Post 79 and the town of Madison. In fact, before our building was built in 1936, in 1922, we were in the Lee Academy, or rather the, not Lee Academy, in the Academy Street School, which was probably Lee Academy. And we had a room there for quite a few years until we built our building. The building, prior to its built, we were in the Grange Hall, which is at the site of the senior center right now. There was a lot of trade-off on properties. There was a trade-off on properties from Grove Street to become Bradley Road. So we've had a partnership with the town. During this time, only in 1952, did the town financially give us some help when we had our World War II veterans coming all back. And they helped us with an addition on the building. But prior to that, we've been self-sustaining. We've never asked for anything. And now with the COVID problem that we've had in the past couple of years, and I do not want to hang this out on COVID, but we've had some serious financial impact because of that. And I think it's about time the building had its fundraising and a fun facelift, exterior and interior. So to give you an idea, Lauren, can you change the next one, please? I want to briefly talk about Legion activities in the past and present, COVID-19 financial impact, our building renovation plans, and our funding to date. All right, next one, Lauren, please. Lauren, next one, please. Thank you. As you know, we're adjacent to the senior center. We do have 130 active members, paid members of the American Legion in the town of Madison. We also have a new women's auxiliary with about 10 to 15 new ladies that are part of the auxiliary. We were established in 1920, as I mentioned. The building that we are in right now was constructed in 1936. And the town, as I mentioned earlier, has a lot of partnerships. One was the property swaps with the Wilcox property years ago, the Bradley Road realignment project, the senior center parking. That was lately, and probably you remember it. We swapped property, we gave property to make it all work because this is our community. The American Legion is a veterans association, but we are in this town a service club. We work with scouts, we work with the different women's club organizations, we work with the Exchange Club of Madison, we are part of this community other than just the veterans. And I really want you to understand that because when I ask for your support, I'm not only asking to support veterans, I'm asking to support the people of this town of Madison. Right? Next one, please, Lauren. And it just goes on to tell you a couple of other things that we do. We are in partners with you on putting flags on veterans' graves every year. You're generous enough to buy the flags, and we feel it's our responsibility to make sure every veteran in every cemetery in this town, which I believe is at least 5 or 6, that we maintain the flags. We remove them, and we do this every single year for veterans in the town of Madison. Interesting point, we put that on there in 1938 hurricane. The town green was divorced of many trees. It was the American Legion in this town that raised money and planted new trees on the Madison Green, because we're your partner. We're not just a tenant here, we're your partner. Right? For 56 years, the American Legion Griswold Post 79 ran the ambulance association in the town of Madison. We worked out of the Grange Hall. Everyone that needed ambulance service in the town for 56 years was taken care of by the American Legion. Right? Another point which we put down, which is interesting. During World War II, during Korea and Vietnam, news from home was printed and mailed to every Madison resident in uniform. We told them about the news at home. Here's what's happening in Madison, guys, girls. This is what's happening, ladies. This is it. We had nurses in those wars, and we had fighting men in those wars. And we sent out the newsletter to every single one of them to let them know what's going on in their homes. Next, Lauren, please. Our activities, you probably know most of them. We do support the Boys and Girls State from Daniel Han High School. That's teaching them how the government works. We send them up to the university in Hartford, and they spend 3 or 4 days there, and they learn government. We sponsored many scout troops over the years, started in 1946, Cub Scouts, over 50 years. If any of you realize what it takes a scout to get an Eagle badge, we have more than 100 Eagle Scouts came out of our post. More than 100 Eagle Scouts. That's how hard we work with them and they work for us.
I learned about the Sea Scouts this weekend.
Well, that's the point. We
We
unfortunately lost one of our Boy Scout troops, but we gained a Sea Scout troop, and they're going to be with us during the. They're with us all year long, but they're going to be using our post during the winter because they can't go out on the water with their kayaks and stuff. And it's really neat. Their captain or their ship's captain is out of the base, and the kids are from Guilford, Clinton, and Madison. It's awesome. As you know, we organized a Memorial Day parade, all the programs that are veteran related in this town, and but not only veterans, like I said before, also civic groups that we support, right? And, we provided meeting hall for business organizations also. During COVID, the Shoreline Youth Concert didn't have a place because they were using a facility that wasn't able, they couldn't use because of the COVID. And our place was big enough for them, and we let them use that. And we also took care of Friends of Library, the Stratton Memorial Library, while they were under construction. We let them use our hall. So the hall is being used. It's probably the largest facility in the town of Madison that isn't publicly owned, and that can be rented by civil organizations and people for private events. Right? I mean, there isn't any other place for people to go if they want to rent a hall. They can go to a restaurant, but there's not that large a rental space. And they can come to probably one of the schools or even a surf club. But this is a large facility, and I think it has a lot of civic needs. Next one, Lauren, please. We have an honor guard. I spoke of this at the Memorial Day ceremony. And this honor guard it comes out of our post. The honor guard goes to all veteran that were requested for veteran burials. We're able to fold flag, but usually National Guard brings their own groups to do that. We will fire volleys. We will play taps. We do about 340 a year, but our total right now is more than 4,300 funerals that we have done out of Madison Post 79, right? We are an honor guard that only go in class uniforms. We don't wear regular civilian jackets or anything like that. We are a credit to this town. People know us as the Madison Honor Guard. They don't know us as Griswold Post 79 Honor Guard. They know us as the Madison Honor Guard. We do a service once a year at the Wall of Honor. If any of you have been to the Capitol building, you've been to the office building. In between, there's a tunnel. Halfway through that tunnel, there's a large room with plaques of Connecticut residents that have veterans that have passed since Vietnam War. And we service that once a year where they're reading their names and doing an honorable mention. Only the Madison Honor Guard is invited to that because of our reputation. Financial support, well, other than what's listed there, you can see Knights of Columbus, Operation American Soldier, Quilts of Honor or Quilts of Valor. We're in the Honor Flight Program, Fisher House, Harkness House, et cetera, et cetera. We give to as many veteran organizations as we can afford to give to. And believe me, the money we've raised, we can spend twice as much for veterans. Right? And with COVID now, a lot of them have been cut short. And we're probably going to be, during the speech here, or presentation, I'll probably be asking about that also. Right? Next one, Lauren, please. This gives you an idea what COVID has done and financial impact on Post 79. All right. The Memorial Day Poppy donations, because we weren't able to do it for 2 years because of we normally do our poppies at Stop and Shop at Roberts. We were in deficit about $17,000. Our meeting hall rentals, which takes care of our building and our maintenance of the building, because of the COVID regulations, we have down about $13,000, total about $30,000. As I mentioned there, the rental bookings are still down. There are still people that will not go into large gatherings and with or without vaccination. I made a note there, many needs, only because we have so many veteran organizations that are asking for support that with our budgets and our commitments from years ago, and anyone that's been involved in the service club, you kind of know what happens. After you give to so many people every year, they expect it. And we want to give. We want to give as much as we can. So if there is any COVID-related funds that are coming through the town, and the town has the ability to give some of those funds out to different organizations, I just want to make it very clear that we are not only a veterans organization, we are a service organization. And we will distribute those funds for you. Sometimes you don't have the ability to find out what veterans need. We know where it's going to go. And if you want it to go to veterans, we are the vehicle that you should use to give money to veterans. All right. Next one, please, Lauren. It just tells us about the building, that it was built in 36, and very few renovations. I mentioned that already. It is a worn out building. It needs some work. We started the renovation because we said, look, we got to do something. All these Band-Aids we've been buying over the years, it's just not working. So we started a phase one, which was put an entire new siding on the building, a new roof. That was going to be phase one. And that phase one started out a little above $100,000. And we wanted it to look like a campus. We had the senior center there. We shared a parking lot. Why not make the building? There it is right there. Be the same color. So we talked to the architect that designed the senior center. He gave us the specs on the siding and the roof. We joined forces with a contractor and we started getting budget numbers, right? As we got into the project, we realized that the disabled handicap ramp wasn't quite up to code right now. And we wanted to relocate it to the back of the building so we could enlarge the porch. We thought that when people rent, and also veterans, when they want to appreciate it, instead of getting 10 people on a porch, you got southern exposure there, it's a ball field and a park. And we don't know what's gonna happen later on. We thought it'd be a nice view, so we're gonna double the size of the porch. And this is all coming under the phase one. So the phase one grew almost to $200,000. And as you know, you're all involved with budgets, you know what construction costs. With the limited amount of construction materials today, the construction materials are high, even though they're coming down a bit. There's still, that $200,000 is still a stretch for our new roof, our new siding, our relocation of the ramp. And we've got some miscellaneous stuff that's gonna be done with foundations and stuff, right? Now we have an aggressive group on our building committee. And we said, look, why don't we do a phase two also? And we'll start doing the inside of the building. As long as we're gonna start making a mess, let's make one mess, all right? And so we've got a project going at 150 that's gonna do our bathrooms over, our kitchen over, our ceilings over. We're gonna put some outside doors in so that we have access to the building without renters. So that our honor guard can come and go as they please, because it does get a little awkward when you're bringing weapons in and out. And so that's something else I'm going to not only make you aware of, but I'm going to ask you. Okay. Next, please, Warren. Okay. Not to let, so that you don't know that we're just not here looking for a handout. So far, we've raised $140,000 on our own for phase one. And I am confident that we will raise $200,000 for the phase one project. We will do that on our own. We're doing it through mailings, we're doing it through GoFundMe, we have ads in the paper, you see them in the source all the time. And we're doing it on our own because we feel that that's our responsibility, right? But I'm hoping that maybe I can get another $150,000 for phase two, if it looks like that's a possibility. All right. Next one, Lauren, please. I don't want to take up too much. I had mentioned this earlier, but yeah, because of our financial losses over the years, there's a couple of, more than a lot of veterans organizations that we cannot give to. And so I'm going to be asking for it, if it's available, from the Federal American Rescue Plan because of COVID. I know that the town will probably be looking to distribute this money. And I just want to emphasize that we are a good vehicle for you to distribute your money, not only to veterans, but we'll also be giving it to other organizations that need it. All right. The last word I have would be, as an organization for veterans and Americanism, we do go to schools every year, as you probably know. We're there on Veterans Day, we're there on Memorial Days. We haven't been there because of COVID, but we're there. And we're not only there, we're not only there to be there, we're there to show children that there's more to this town than taxpayers' money. There are people that made sacrifices. And I want to emphasize that because we are an organization that will teach children. We're in parades. If you go down the I march in the Veterans Parade, the kids are waving their flags. This past the 4th of July parade, I was part of the veterans group. There must have been about 60 of us, and the kids are out there. Without these parades, without organizations, there's nothing they can really relate to other than listening to their parents. When we go to these schools, we go to all the schools on the different days. Their grandfathers are there that are veterans. Their aunts and uncles are there veterans. So this is how we're partnering with the town. We're a partner. We're there for the children. We want to make our image. We want them to see that this is what happens. These are people that have sacrificed other than being taxpayers. And that's probably all I have to say. I would like, if you need numbers, you can always call me. And I can go over all the numbers. If you'd like to go over the numbers with you right now, it's gonna take a while. I will do that also.
Well, I first of all, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. And obviously, thank you for everybody who's been doing for all the service you provide to the community. So we're very grateful for that. In terms of the project that you're referring to, I think we had chatted about, we are going through the process now. We're going to talk later in our board tonight about putting together a committee to focus just on American Rescue Plan funds.
Okay.
So part of that committee will then go through and review all different applications as they come in and set priorities, and they'll make recommendations to our board. Our board will kind of put forward a proposed plan for the funds, and then that will go through the Board of Finance. We'll also have a public hearing on all that. So we welcome you to put forward plans for that. And I think there's two different things. There's your building renovation project, but then there's also the replenishment of the revenue loss from COVID.
Yep.
Because of the service organizations that you support. So I think it's two different things that you want to look at it, because one is more focused on forward looking for your building, but the other one, there's a clear impact that COVID has had in terms of your financial wherewithal. And so we're going to be talking more about this task force tonight. We've been doing some projects already in a more limited fashion, but now we're going to be opening the American Rescue Plan Fund Up Task Force. That's going to be more of a public body that'll start reviewing all projects so they're weighed appropriately. One of the things I think you highlighted is something that we're going to think hard about is having outside organizations be that administrator, because there's actually a lot of work involved to report to the federal government, the Treasury, on how the money is spent. And also, you have a better idea than maybe we do about what groups really need money, right? So to have those kinds of recommendations come from groups that are engaged in the community is going to be very helpful to us. So I think that's a great concept, and we're going to be talking more about that at the board level. So I would say you've got all the details. There'll be an appropriate time in the next couple of months to start submitting that as we finalize this committee and create a process to review all those proposals. But you definitely have, I think, two things that you can think about submitting and making the rest of the town about. So I appreciate that.
All right.
And I'm glad to hear that your phase one is doing as well as it has. I mean, you still have a little ways to go, but it's great that you've gotten a lot of donors to step up. The question I have is, have you looked into other types of grant money to help also work on the building fund? Have you talked to our state representatives about possible state grants? Or looked into
No, we
any of
haven't.
those? Because there are some out there that do target veterans organizations. And so, I think it's worth maybe, I'll try to do a little more research. I've seen some things come in that you might want to apply, if maybe it's not right for phase one, because you're pretty far along. You could put phase two in for that, for some grant requests.
Well, any help that this committee can do for us, we'd appreciate it a lot. All right. Because you're our partner, partners.
I know I've been to a lot of events at that building for sure, so all
Thank you
different
very
kinds of
much.
events.
I'd like to
So,
thank you on behalf of all of us.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you so much for everybody.
Just a couple of, I just have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
What is the timing on phase two?
We should be starting phase two in a couple of weeks, according to our contract.
Phase one.
Oh, phase two?
one.
Phase two is going to be probably phased in after phase one is complete, which is going to be like a 3-month project.
Okay, so relatively quickly then.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's why we're looking for a large sum from a large donor.
Okay. You've listed some numbers in your presentation, but
Yes.
then you left a couple of blanks. And as Peggy mentioned, we do have money for recovery from the financial impact of COVID. So I think if you guys could go back and look at your last normal year and then look at what you suffered through financially during COVID, and then also in this return to normalcy. I think it would be helpful for us to get a sense of what that complete number is. So that we can better help you out. And then I would add, this is gonna be spread out over a couple of years, so.
The project?
No, the
For the
COVID money.
funding.
Oh,
So
money,
we
funding.
have until 2024 to identify how we're spending the money,
Okay.
and then 2026 to actually spend it all.
Right.
So we have some lead time to prioritize, and actually, right now, the town has only received half the amount. We'll be receiving the second installment 12 months from now.
But as you go through and do your work to identify what the consequences of COVID was and continue to be, don't feel like this is the only time you're gonna be able to make the ask. If something, we get a little farther down the road and you realize that you missed something, you can come back to us. So you're gonna get more than one bite at the apple if you need it.
Well, like I mentioned, there's a lot of veterans organizations that are asking us that we haven't even considered. Only because in the past we haven't given to them, but because of COVID, they're all coming out of the woodwork now and they need all the help they can get. So.
I think, it would be helpful to see, what typically you would give on an annual basis to
Okay.
different groups, because that gives us an idea of order of magnitude, and then and then you obviously, not having the funding, you can't support it.
I can give you a complete breakdown of what we've done in the past years and our projection for the new askings. I would do that. And anything else? We'll stay in the loop with you, definitely. We will.
Okay, great, all right.
Thanks a lot.
I had been working with Charlie, and I've been doing a lot of research trying to find grants. So when you talk about the grants, our biggest thing is I'm looking for a grant writer. Because I don't even know where to begin. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
Do you have any people that you know of that?
We do not, I mean, that's one of the identified needs in town government, because I feel we do miss out on a lot of opportunities because we don't have
There's a lot of
specialists in this
grants
area.
out there, but
We're actually going to get a staff member go through a training in August, so at least they're kind of a qualified grant writer. This is on top of a job they already have, so, maybe, I can, kind of ask around and point you guys in a direction of somebody that might be, because sometimes people will do this on a volunteer basis, they just have a lot of experience with grants, right?
yeah.
So I'll definitely see if I can find somebody that might be able to
Is
assist
that
you.
person that's going to the grant, would it be possible, let's say, for me to attend that grant class too?
Oh, so it is I can forward you, it's a training being offered, I think it costs like $500. So there's a cost component to it, and it's through, I can't remember, some organization. It came into my email and we talked about it internally. We identified employees. We thought it'd be worth at least getting them trained in it. But let's talk in the next week and see, because it is a problem that we've had. We have people that kind of do it by department, but it really does become now a specialty, and there's so much going on out there in terms of grant opportunities. So it's something we've actually talked about using American Rescue Plan funds to hire a consultant that would be able to help us kind of go through that. And one of their things could be identifying grants, also to help partner with some of the rescue fund projects that we would be funding. So I'll let you know if I learn more, and I can also dig back and find that seminar that they're doing. It's online, it's an online training.
Oh,
And maybe there's some other doesn't have a cost component to it that you could get involved with also. I'll see what I can find out for you, okay?
okay, thanks.
I have a question about process.
Mhm.
Are we supposed to submit an application or something to be considered? How does that process work?
We're putting that process together now. Right now, we've been having kind of people submit we've been dealing more with town needs, and we're trying to set up now a way for outside organizations to come make requests. So we don't have that finalized yet, but that will be getting put together here in the next month.
And will we be notified of that process, or do we have to somehow come and find out?
You will be notified. There'll be a lot of public information that we're gonna put out there. So I don't know, during the long-term recovery committee process during COVID, we had a committee that had a designated liaison to civic and veterans organizations. So that was, I think, was it Scott Erskine? Or I can't remember who it was, or was that Scott Cochran? So so there was a way that people could kind of funnel in to make requests to the town. We're gonna create that same kind of structure again for this. And there'll be something on the website, but we'll notify you, especially now that we know you have a project that you want us to put in. So this is gonna go on our request list, so it won't get lost. It'll be there. Lauren has all the information. We've got kind of a database building of people that are coming with requests. And we'll make sure that everybody gets notified if there's like a form or, once we finalize the committee process.
Thank you,
Okay?
thank you.
Great. All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation, so.
Thank you.
Ready?
Do you want to be dismissed?
You're welcome to stay, but it's getting a little warm in here, so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all right, so moving on, if the board's ready, we'll move on to item number 7. Discuss and take action to approve hiring Jennifer Logitis, I don't know how to pronounce it, I apologize, to the position of before and after school program director in the Beach and Recreation Department. Position is non-union, rate of pay is grade 5, step 5, $28.50 per hour. The position is budgeted, not requiring an appropriation of funds. This position vacancy was created due to retirement. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions? We have Austin here, and Deb may be available if we have specifics, but is everybody comfortable with this? Okay, no questions? Great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, item number 8, discuss and take action to approve hiring Justin Ziegler to the position of Youth Development Coordinator 2 in the Youth and Family Services Department. The position is non-union, rate of pay is grade 6, step 4, $29.02 per hour. The position is budgeted, not requiring appropriation of funds. This position vacancy was created due to a resignation.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments?
I'm excited.
No? Okay, great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to accept a grant in an amount up to $12,000 from Workforce Alliance to provide funding for a Madison Youth and Family Service Summer Youth Employment Program.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and I think you were provided with the grant application. Any additional questions on that grant? No, it's a great program that we do every year. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Number 10, discuss and take action to approve the SCROG Regional Purchasing Consortium on-call engineering services vendor list as recommended by the Public Works Department.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. And just real quickly, this is actually, I think, a wonderful idea that SCROG came up with to put together a vetted group of vendors that'll save a lot of time on the RFP process. I know the Public Works Department said this is going to be able to just go to this list is going to save them a lot of time. And they have a lot of projects coming up. So any additional questions on this?
So this is approving the use of any of the vendors who are on the list.
Right. Yeah, so, and so there doesn't have to be like this whole long
It's like a
process.
pre-approval.
Yeah, approval, exactly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Okay, item number 11, discuss and take action to approve the West Wharf licensing agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. So this is something we'd spoken about at a previous meeting. And I just thought, real quick, I will show what we were talking about here. This is involving, this is involving the, here we go. So for the public's benefit, there's a part of West Wharf Beach that is used frequently by the public. It's actually owned by a private property owner. There's been a lot of discussions about how do we ensure liability management for that property owner, continued public access for that property. And so what the town has done is entered into a temporary licensing agreement. And that will be going on a month-to-month basis. And then we're going to work towards a longer-term kind of solution, basically, to make sure that the public has continued access to that stretch of the beach. So a part of the agreement was just to get board endorsement at the state. So I don't know, Lauren, if is Scott Duquesne here, if he wants to make any comments or not. He's the property owner. He mentioned he might want to attend the meeting. If not, that's okay. Oh, okay, here he is.
Chair.
No, I think he's muted, so. Okay, there we go. Scott, you're on?
I am, yes. Hi.
Okay, great. So I just put up and did a brief summary of the agreement, the temporary nature of it, and also just highlighted what we're speaking about in terms of the piece of the beach.
Yeah, I just agree with basically what you've laid out. The plan is to try and put something in place longer term that continues to give the public access to that beach. And this is just a temporary solution so we can get to that longer term agreement.
Great, thank you very much. And any questions from board members on this? No?
I don't have any questions. I just want to disclose for the public that my relationship to Scott Duquesne, which is through my husband, is Scott Duquesne's cousin. So in my reading of our code of ethics as proposed, I don't believe it's a conflict of interest. I do not stand to gain financially from this purchase or this lease agreement.
Licensing agreement.
The
Okay,
license.
great. All right, great. Any more questions or comments? No?
No.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Scott, appreciate it, and we'll be in touch in September, okay? All right, thanks a lot. So that is, all right, item number 12. Discuss and take action to enter into a 5-year lease agreement for $655,714 with First American for the financing of the 2022 Capital Improvement Program Highway Equipment Leasing Plan, and to authorize the first selectman to sign the same.
So moved. Second.
Okay, and this is basically just the leasing agreement. We've done some special appropriations through the budgeting process to fund this, and this is getting us those new trucks that we wanted. So,
Nice.
any questions on the documents? Stacy's available? Nope.
Nope.
Okay, all in favor,
Been through it
say.
in detail.
Yeah. Well, the rates are really low, so that was
Yeah.
good. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Item number 13, discuss and take action to enter into a 4-year lease agreement for $208,000 for the financing of the 2022 Capital Improvement Program Police Vehicle Replacement Leasing Plan, and to authorize the first selectman to sign the same.
So moved. Second.
Okay, great. And once again, it's the same thing that is part of the CIP program and funding for our fleet of vehicles for the police department. Any more questions? No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great. All right, moving on. Number 14. Discuss and take action to approve 2 applications under the Town of Madison Tax Incentive Assessment Deferral Program Policy to town meeting.
So moved. Second.
Okay, and actually, Lauren, are there 2, the actual motions that we need to do to send it to town meeting? Did you send it to me?
Yeah, I can, and I have it here. I can read it if you want me to.
Okay, well, let's, I guess, first of all, yeah, so we should actually read it with the motions. Or no, do we have discussion first? And then read the motions afterwards? Yeah, okay, or why don't you go ahead and read the motions?
All right, so the first motion is to approve applications from 175 Fort Path Road LLC / Milano Development and Ironworks LLC under the Town of Madison Tax Incentive / Assessment Deferral Program, pending Board of Finance and town meeting approval.
I amend my original motion to that.
Thank you.
Second.
Perfect.
All right, discussion. So this is the first applicant who I don't think Mr. Milano was here. He was at our last meeting. I see Jerry Davis is here, so we'll talk about this in a second. This is relating to a project that he had actually applied for during COVID. And given the fact that we were unable to hold a town meeting, he was kind of forced to continue to move his project along, but is still eagerly waiting to get a decision on the tax incentive policy. So this is his phase 2 of his project. And I think the board was sent out kind of what the potential benefits would be from the project. And I just want to highlight for the public that the incentives, the way they're structured, it's the increase in assessed value. It's not the total assessed value. So it's just going to be whatever value is added by the project, and it's limited as a benefit for 5 years, the first 5 years of the project, because of the size of this, so according to the policy. So any questions from the board on this?
No questions. I'm excited that we are finally exercising this. We were brought this idea by the EDC some years ago, so 4+ years ago.
2018 or something.
We had high hopes that it would spark a little interest in responsible and consistent development with Madison, and here we are with 2 projects. I think it's exciting and is a good signal that Madison's a town that wants to work with developers for responsible development.
Any other questions on this? I know we had a nice presentation before, we've talked about this a few times. No? Okay, so I guess we vote on this one, all in favor?
Nope.
Oh,
The motion was for both applications. So
Oh,
you
it
can
was,
talk about
okay.
the second one and then we'll do the vote.
Okay, then we'll do the vote. Okay, so the second application then is related to Mr. Davis's project on Bradley Road, which is a residential multifamily rental building that would be built in what is now a vacant lot. I've seen that the laundromat has finally been given its due. And obviously this is a project that I think is, I think the value of it was $4.1 million. This would actually stretch over a 7-year period where the developer would receive some tax incentives for the incremental increase in assessed value to the project. The board received what estimates that might be over a period of time. And I think Mr. Davis has made it very clear that the tax incentive policy was an important part of him being able to achieve this project to move forward. So it was an important part of his decision-making process, and that's why he's eager to get a answer on this before he can kind of move forward on his construction. So any questions on the Bradley Road project?
Just procedurally, does Lauren need to read that motion into the record as well?
Because I think you said just Fort Path, that's why I was.
Nope. I said 175 Fort Path / Milano Development and Ironworks LLC. So that's
Oh,
2.
Ironworks, your Ironworks.
His
Okay,
Ironworks.
I'm sorry, Lauren, thank you.
Okay. Okay, all right, any further questions on this?
Not a question, but maybe
Yeah.
just a clarification. It's sure to come up. The applicants are allowed to choose between 2 different schedules of deferment. They total out over their period of time within dollars of each other. One of them is more beneficial from a cash flow perspective early on, and one of them is the slightly more valuable, but just slightly. But they are paying an even amount over the entire period of time. So
Yeah.
when we talk about the numbers at the town meeting, they're going to look a little bit different,
Yeah.
and it will be up to the applicant to signal to us which one they think.
Yeah, I think
best
the
for them.
applicant would be best served if you chose which path he would take in those, so the choice is left up to you. So you would want to make a determination, I think, by the
Right.
town meeting. So
But the numbers are
you
so close that the
Right.
town has no reason to really have a preference of one over the
No,
other there.
and I will highlight, the other thing is none of these numbers are guaranteed because it really depends on what the assessor ultimately determines the incremental value of the property is with the development. So it's the assessor that makes the determination, not us as a board or the developer. So it's just allowing that incremental difference to become that benefit, so. Okay, so any more questions on this project as well? And then I guess we can do we just have a motion, right? So we can take a vote. All in favor of approving the applications as per the motion according to Lauren? Say aye. Aye. Okay, great. Yeah, because I know we were trying to figure out what the right wording is. So we can't call the town meeting though until after the Board of Finance reviews this, correct, Lauren? So,
No, we actually had talked about calling the town meeting tonight and then just noting that the items were pending Board of Finance approval. So it's really just a matter of We did talk about, though, that the wording of the motions for town meeting should include the number of years that the assessment deferral was applicable for. So if we don't have those yet, we might want to determine those before actually calling the town meeting.
Okay.
Well, we're kind of stuck in
Yeah.
special meeting
Right.
purgatory as well, right?
Right. Well, no, but I thought that we can make them.
This isn't a special meeting.
It is, because it was a regular meeting that was changed.
Oh.
So within 30 days.
Oh,
So,
there you go.
yeah, I know, I kept forgetting that. I was like, it's.
We can't open the agenda.
Well, you're not opening it. It would just be another motion under item 14. Item 14 says that you're sending it to town meeting. So it's not off of the topic of item number 14.
But we need an answer from Mr. Davis, correct?
Terrific.
No,
So
but I
what
think
would be,
another-
what would be the likely date of the town meeting?
That again is up to you guys. Generally, when we have a town meeting like this, we would do it similar to how we did tonight's town meeting. So prior to an evening meeting of the Board of Selectmen, either at 6 or 6:30 p.m. Your next meeting is August 23rd, and I could get it into the paper for then, but it would probably be better to wait until the September 27th evening meeting.
Well, I can further amend my original motion to have it be the September evening meeting.
We would do a second motion under this item. So I would need a motion to approve calling a town meeting on September 27th at 6:30 p.m. in Town Campus Room A.
So you're saying 23rd doesn't work? August 23rd because Board of Finance is this Wednesday, so that doesn't give you adequate time. It's too tight.
I don't know if I have registrars that can do
Yeah,
the
right.
23rd. That's the only thing. And we're in the middle of, I know that a couple people have vacations that week.
Right, I remember you saying that there was you were talking to the registrars. about
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so why don't we amend it for the September, and we could always change that at another meeting as well if we had to, right? So,
Yeah.
right, and it's also pending Board of Finance, so,
Okay, so I'll make that second motion for the September date at 6:30.
Okay.
Second.
and that is September, what's the date again?
27th.
So we don't have a date before that, a Board of Selectmen meeting before that?
We were talking
Not
about,
an evening.
It has to be an evening meeting for the time, yeah, okay, all right. Okay, even though no one comes to the town meetings, so, okay, all right, September 22nd, I'm good with that. All right, so, all in favor of calling town meeting on September 27th, say aye.
aye.
Aye, okay, great. So that'll be added to what it goes forward to the Board of Finance then, correct? Oh, this is just pending their approval, so.
Right.
All right. Okay, great. So we're good. Let's move forward in the process for a Board of Finance review. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, discuss and take action to approve a moratorium on applications under the Town of Madison Tax Incentive Assessment Referral Program until the policy can be reviewed and revised in accordance with planning initiatives at last no longer than 6 months. I should say. So I put this on here as kind of a conversation for us to have. So we don't have to take action. I think it's one of these things I think it's good to talk about, and we can decide to do this tonight or make an action item for the future. So can I get a motion, I guess, for discussion?
So moved.
Yeah, second.
Okay, great. So I think that, having now gone through the opportunity to review 2 applications, and kind of get our arms around this tax incentive policy, I feel it's important that the board step back and just take a pause to look at, what our ultimate objectives are with the policy. And I know when this was done a couple of years ago, there was kind of a general perspective of, obviously incentivizing development in town and a growing brand list. But I think as we weave through this with these last 2 applications, we started to understand what kinds of projects qualify for this. And there's not really a lot of criteria in this about the types of projects. And so I just think it might be helpful for the board to take a little time to think about what our ultimate economic development objectives would be with this type of policy. Because the way it's written right now, And this is no criticism of the EDC. I think they've done a great job, and they've modeled this off of what other communities have done. But obviously, as the policy setting board, I think it's important we make sure that we're using this the right way. It's the right tool going forward. So because there have been some controversial, cluster housing development projects here in town over the last year. So we've kind of had that experience to go through. And so I want to make sure that we're just mindful of what we're trying to achieve with the policy.
I'm not sure I'm clear on the concerns.
It sounds like we're just talking about adding some additional criteria of how we screen applications, correct? Or what qualifies as an application that would come in front of us as a board?
Yeah, it might be, because I did talk to our town council a little bit about this, and Lauren, I think Carrie is probably available to bring up to the, here she is. Great. Welcome, Carrie. We're just talking about the tax incentive policy. And I think that just in my conversations with her, my biggest concern was, first of all, are we obligated now to approve any applicant that comes to us? And she's, I think, confirmed that we have a lot of discretion, right? The board has discretion. But as you know, once you do start making approvals and moving forward, you set precedents. And so, and I think we need to learn through kind of like what precedents we're setting and what are we setting ourselves up for in the future. In terms of having to review and possibly support. So I was trying to understand a little bit more, like, does the board feel there should be additional criteria? Like, are we trying to achieve, areas that have been vacant for a long time, or job creator types of development, or are we trying to, Madison doesn't have brownfield sites, which a lot of times you see these types of incentives targeted at brownfields in the community, which we don't really have that. I think right now we're living through one of the biggest and strongest residential booms in our town's history. So would we want to be providing tax incentives to residential developers? Because this is basically any 4-unit or more project could potentially apply for that. Now we have the ability to just say no, which we certainly do. But I guess I just don't, I'd hate to have the board have to weigh in and start picking one project over another.
Is there anybody on the phone from the EDC that could chime in with what criteria they use to screen these first 2 applicants?
So, I just having been on EDC, as liaison, Brian, let me take a first stab at this. This document derives all of its authority from state statute 1265B, which prescribes the types of projects that are eligible for consideration. So to the extent that we describe projects, we're simply relying on the state statute for that. So the discretion on what types of projects we can accept or not accept, they would have to be in compliance with 1265B to begin with, right? So that 4 or more units is part of the state statute.
Right, along with a number of other things that say in the statute about, there's actually quite a list of stuff. So it's a lot of different types of projects, including commercial development, warehouses, it specifies.
Right, and that's my point exactly, that our policy can't exclude things that are already accommodated in the state statute. And absent our policy, a developer could come to us and say, we'd like to enter into an agreement with you under 1265B, and we would have the discretion, as we do now, to say, yes, we want to have that conversation, or no, we don't.
Bruce. Hey, Bruce, hi, it's Ryan Duquez. Yeah, if I could just add to what you're saying, your thinking is in parallel to what I've thought after receiving Peggy's note on Friday afternoon regarding the concerns. And I do believe as we navigate through the first few applications that you've just approved, that it's this type of reflection is warranted. I do, as a chair of EDC, want to continue to set the tone that Madison is absolutely open for this type of application. That we certainly want to work with developers who are interested in enhancing our commercial properties with responsible development. It's important to point out that before an application can come forward, as they did tonight, those projects need to receive all approvals throughout our entire process beforehand, planning and zoning and otherwise. So these are projects that have already passed the scrutiny to ensure that they meet the character of our town. And as Bruce pointed out, the state statute governs whether or not an applicant can come forward to bring this application to the boards and ultimately to town meeting for approval. It's not under the purview of the Board of Selectmen or the EDC to say whether or not we can look at an application under this state statute. What the EDC policy strove to do, what was first provided in 2018, and then that this current Board of Selectmen approved last summer in July, and they discussed, and then you approved it in September. It just provides a roadmap. It allows for a developer to understand how the state statute might apply to our form of government with town meetings. So it's certainly not setting a policy. And as Peggy, as you described already, we don't need to entertain any application. We don't need to approve any application if we don't believe that it adds to the vibrancy and the economic development goals that we're setting forth. So certainly appreciate the reflection. The word moratorium unfortunately has a negative connotation. And in terms of setting precedents, I think you've done so this evening by approving the two great applications that we've already brought forward.
Ryan, I'm curious. I was sort of asking Bruce earlier, and I didn't realize you're on the phone, so this is great. Well, are there specific criteria that you guys as the EDC would decide yay or nay to pass an application on to the Board of Selectmen for consideration?
So the EDC, first of all, doesn't pass. We're not one of the check marks. We simply endorse an application. But in order for us to endorse an application, just like many of the projects that occur in town, there is some subjectivity. The criteria that generally we discuss when we endorse any project or write a letter in support of any project is, what is the vibrancy that it's producing for our community? Is it adding to the grand list in a significant way? Is it taking a property like the Tux's Laundromat property, which not only probably wasn't the best use of that property, but also was way undervalued for what it could be in terms of how it's on our grand list. If it creates jobs as well, that's a huge plus. Originally on the policy, Scott, that you approved in 2018, we actually had a few of those additional items listed. But in reflecting on how this document was being interpreted, the current sitting EDC decided that we would kind of remove some of those criteria so that it was more open to state statute, not because those criteria aren't important, but really we wanted to get utilization of the policy. We hadn't gotten any bites yet. So now we finally have a couple of bites on the current policy.
When you were developing the policy, Ryan, did you look at other towns' policies, and did they include criteria?
Many of them refer to the state statute. We did look. There's several towns that we looked at, including North Branford. I think actually Sherry Cody was just telling me that Guilford also just passed a policy as well. So we did look at them. Many of them, are very, very similar to the state statute. Instead of kind of regurgitating some of that language, we were more open about kind of just how the process applied to our form of government to kind of give that roadmap to a developer.
I'm just curious, maybe this is a question because Carrie, in terms of the state statute just says that we could consider requests, right? We're not obligated, like if somebody, like the board doesn't have to, if some developer, if we did have a policy in place and a developer just came to us and said, and wrote a letter and said, we want these tax breaks. Is the board of selectmen required to take action on it? Or is it just, there's no obligation by legislative body to approve or disapprove that, right? Whereas we've set out an actual application process that does require an approve or disapprove process. Once you enter that application, you then the board has to take action on it.
So yeah, that's back to Ryan's comments. The state statute was always there.
Well, yeah, I wanted to carry.
We have Carrie in?
Yeah, I
Well,
just wanted.
she's on mute, so she
Yeah.
hasn't.
Carrie, I don't know if you heard my question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay.
Really. So I apologize. Yes, no, I've been listening to all of you. So let me just say, first of all, the statute is not mandatory, it's permissive. So you have every right to decide what types of development that fall under the statute that you're willing to consider. And what you all did back when you adopted the policy is you decided on a process and a procedure to deal with 1265B, as many towns have done. But that's your policy and procedure. And what you've told developers who are coming to your town or and want to take advantage of the 1265B tax fixing statute is that here's the policy that we have implemented that sets forth the process by which we're going to receive applications and process them. The issue that I saw with your policy is that as it stands right now, it appears, and I'm not saying that it still doesn't mean you don't have some discretion, but it appears on its face that as long as they meet the monetary requirements, it's fair game. And there is no alert to a developer coming to Madison to say, here's all the things we're going to think about. So it's not just about, are you investing enough dollars? It's also going to be about, what are you proposing? Where are you proposing it? What's the likely economic benefit long-term, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that was raised to me was the question of, do we really want to give tax incentives to multifamily housing if what we're really focused on is economic growth? And again, I am not here to weigh in on whether that's appropriate or not appropriate. I don't set policy, you do. But what I'm suggesting is that if you're not interested in applying 1265B to residential uses, it would probably be worthwhile to send the, alert to those who are coming to your town to take advantage of this statute, to let them know that that's one of the criteria that you're going to be thinking about. You certainly have discretion. And I just, again, I think we're on the same page, but what I was hearing tonight from some was, look, if they come in with any of the uses provided under the statute, it's fair game. What I'm saying to you is, this is discretionary. And if there are, so certainly for 1265B to apply, it has to be one of those uses, but it's still up to you to decide which of those uses you're going to be willing to accept an application for a tax fixing agreement. And then at the end of the day, it's the legislative body that decides whether to grant the tax fixing agreement, again, based on your criteria, your policies, your procedures. I know one question was raised was, can we even have a moratorium on our policy? The answer is yes. There's nothing in the statute that says you have to have a policy, right? This is just the way you've told the public you're going to deal with these types of applications. Certainly, if you refuse to address an application that comes in and with enough votes, they could petition you to take the matter up, whether you have a moratorium or not. And then ultimately it goes to the legislative body to make a decision. But again, it is permissive. And what was shared with me was the idea that maybe there needed to be a discussion about what your true developmental goals are, so that your policy, so you can't criticize if one applicant comes to you and says, hey, I'm doing 4 more multifamily dwelling units. You approved a similar application last year. How come you're not approving mine? And so one of the concerns that I was trying to address with the suggestion was give yourselves an opportunity to sit back and come up with sort of some overarching planning goals, economic development goals that would at least suggest to developers who make application, here's all the things we're going to be thinking about. Here's all the things we're going to want you to explain to us that justify us endorsing this type of a tax fixing agreement. Again, nothing's written in stone, but your policy currently is very bare. It basically says, it's based solely on economic investment and then a schedule of payments. So that was the idea behind it. And certainly I don't set policy, but that was the basis for the suggestion.
And that was all that was meant. Like, I'm not, if the board is not wholly in agreement of putting a moratorium, and I apologize if that was deemed as some sort of negative connotation. It was just more a pause. Like when I say pause, just to say, so we don't have another application coming forward where, we haven't set those goals yet. So that was all my suggestion was. If there's not consensus to do that, we can continue to let the policy stay, but I would like agreement that we would address those bigger policy goals that we want to set. And I know one of the things we're going to be talking about is if we hire this new economic development coordinator, part of that, and I know the EDC is very supportive of this, is kind of creating that strategic planning goals for the town. So we marry up our economic development goals with all the other objectives we have in town. So,
But let's be clear, in the end, we don't have to
right,
accept every
Right.
application either.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's to our discretion, correct?
right.
So absolutely, and I would add that I think the planning role in town, working with the developer in the early stages and the EDC getting involved in it would be that leading indicator to us that this is a project that may or may not be a good fit, right? So in order for it to even get to us, it already has to check ACA and the historic district. If there's,
It has to get through planning and zoning.
it's got to get through inland wetlands. It's got to get through planning and zoning.
Right.
So it has to be in the.
The planning and zoning doesn't opine, they have regulations that they follow, and, so they aren't opining on goals and objectives of the community and what economic development we want to see in the community. They're looking at the regulations, does this follow the regulations?
Well, but those regulations are designed to reflect our values as a community.
Well, and we
what
will be
we're hoping to-
updating the plan of conservation and development starting this year as well, so.
Right.
So they do follow the plan of conservation and development goals and objectives, they do that, and that's part of what they have to do, so,
So I have two concerns. The first is,
well, you're concerned though about, I'm saying we don't have to put the moratorium in place, I'm just suggesting though that if we don't do that, that we do commit to talking as a board more about what those, what the objectives of this policy is, that's all.
I think, and so 100% agree, 100% agree. We started that process a while back and we've kind of set it aside. We need to pick up the bigger conversation. And like you said, the plan of conservation and development work will be beginning soon. So I think we can do that. It's a big topic though, right?
It is a very big topic, yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be resolved inside of 6 months or maybe even 12 months, but certainly we could make progress and we could be giving the town planner and EDC the benefit of our thinking as we go along, so that as they're hearing all of the applications that are sure to come,
Well,
we
and-
can be having that.
Can I just jump in? So just so I'm understanding you correctly, Carrie, even if we theoretically put a moratorium on the policy, that doesn't stop anyone from coming forward with an application during this 6-month process or whatever period that we put on it.
Just means they're not coming out.
Oh. That,
Well, no, they still have to come to us because it's under the statute.
yeah, so again, let's be clear, 1265B is permissive.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
say that again?
It's permissive. Permissive, meaning just because it's written there, you don't have to give another tax fixing agreement ever in Madison going forward if you choose not
Correct.
under the statute. But because it's the legislative body that ultimately makes the decision and it's permissive, arguably, and this is very convoluted, arguably they could file a 7-1 petition, ask to get on your agenda, and try to push it through, even if you had a moratorium. Would a developer do that? I think to their peril. No, I don't think they would do that, because I think they would appreciate that it likely would not be approved and it'd be a lot of cost and expense. But as you know, anyone can petition you to put something on your agenda if they get 20 voters, right? So again, nothing is absolute. All I'm trying to say is because the statute is permissive, you do have discretion to choose the types of projects that you feel justify giving a tax abatement to. In other words, just because they meet the financial criteria of your existing policy, you may decide that you don't think it's going to bring in the same economic growth that justifies reducing your grand list for 7 to 10 years, right?
But to
all
be
I'm-
precise, we wouldn't be reducing our grand list for 7 to 10 years. We can only be increasing it. We never reduce the value of the property or the taxes we're collecting it.
But Bruce, we're assuming if we don't grant these, they wouldn't build it. Okay, but we already just approved an application where they actually did build it despite having the incentives. So people can come in here, try to get the incentives, and then if they don't get the incentives, they still do the project and we get the full value of the assessed value rather than the incremental difference.
And you are reducing the grand list. You're correct. The grand list initially, everything is listed at value. And then the next column, right, tells you whether things are exempt or whether there are tax fixing agreements in place. So you're effectively reducing the grand list for purposes of taxation, for purposes of applying the mill rate when you enter into a tax fixing agreement. And I don't set policy. I'm not here to tell you what you should do, but I had to agree with Peggy that your current policy is only clear on one thing, and that is the value. You've got to bring to us at least X, and that's it.
So can I interrupt you for just 1 sec? So one of the things that Ryan mentioned earlier, which I found interesting, and I like the idea, is that it speaks to the vibrancy, the application speaks to the vibrancy of our town. How does one define that? Or how is that being screened or qualified? If numbers is the only qualifier.
No, we can put whatever we want in there.
No, I understand, but I'm saying today, what it is.
I think, so
Is
Scott,
that,
if
is
I
that
could-
subjective? I guess I'm just trying to understand.
it is, there is a certain amount of subjectivity that goes into this. And the
Okay.
original policy, if you remember, actually used the word vibrancy, I believe, in it. And again, I think this is a great exercise to go through as we finally get to see some applications in. These applications took 3 years to get in. I think that we have time between now and the next application to review the policy and to perhaps to figure out how do we encourage vibrancy using words that are somewhat subjective, but maybe we could also find some other criteria that allows for us to be more concrete on the types of development that we would like to see. In terms of multi-unit housing, Peggy, I know you mentioned that. I'm not sure that's something we want to exclude, because that has been a priority for some time, to not only include, denser housing opportunities, but also workforce housing. And many of those types of projects might actually be good under this policy. So those are the types of things. And again, I think
No,
the EDC has
I'm
been,
not opposed to including housing, but I was just saying,
okay,
means anything of 4 units or more would basically qualify for these tax incentives. And I think we need to see, like, to your point, the types of housing that we think would benefit the community. And just like we do
That's
with
right.
housing grants, right? And tax abatements, which we're gonna be looking at an application for that, because that serves a specific need to the community. But
If I may, Madam Chairman, I just, again, what I think that I was being asked to address was not so much eliminating any of the uses under 1265B, but to better define the universe of criteria that you're going to be balancing in deciding whether what comes before you is truly going to be vibrant for your community. And I didn't mean to pick on multifamily housing. I am 100% with you. There will be projects that come that I think you will find really do meet your planning objectives and are worthy of a tax abatement. But there may be other residential projects that come before you that are more likely to cost the town in services, et cetera, and maybe not justify a tax abatement for 10 years. Again, I'm only throwing it out there for your consideration. I don't propose policy. I'm just saying that I don't think it hurts to alert people who apply that what you're going to be thinking about is more than just the dollars. Because what I see right now in your policy is that is the only clear criterion. And so to avoid people complaining that you're, you allowed one project that came in at X dollars, but you're not allowing a different project that came in at X dollars, when that's all the criterion that are in your policy currently, I could see you being subject to, criticism for that. But if you added some more objective and subjective criterion, then everybody's on alert that when they come before you with an application, it's not enough just to show you the economic value, but they also need to show how they meet your planning objectives, your affordable housing objectives, right? Your infrastructure objectives.
well, and that's, and I think that those are all things, because we now have an affordable housing committee, and they're gonna be making recommendations to us and come up with some conclusions too about addressing the affordable housing issue. I think there's a lot to talk and think about, and I appreciate your comments on this, Karen. I think it's just helpful to think through the future, right? And so that's where, as I said, if the board is uncomfortable, doing a moratorium, I think that we should just make a commitment to start working on that. And then, but just knowing that we are exposing ourselves to potential new applications while we're going through that process, that might force us to more rapidly have to.
vote no.
Yeah, exactly. So we have the ability to say no. And I think that as long as everybody understands that.
Well, I also heard too that from Ryan, that the EDC was contemplating some of this criteria they were thinking anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
maybe they come back to us with some of the criteria that they're thinking about, and that will then help us
Right, come
make
up
those
with our own,
decisions.
right.
Yeah.
So maybe what I can do is just withdraw my motion, right?
Well, I'd like to sum up where I am, and
Yeah,
maybe
okay.
if others are with me, we'll have a different kind of motion. This has been a very stimulating conversation, very helpful conversation to me tonight, and a number of people have contributed to it. It occurs to me that this is the first time we've actually applied this policy and procedure, and it's given us a moment to reflect on our own personal comfort with how this is taking place. I'm of the mind that we should not consider further applications until we have come up with how we're going to proceed on this in terms of criteria. I would be uncomfortable considering another application at this moment in time until I have a better sense of a number of things. there are at least 7 criteria that have been suggested in our conversation tonight. I've heard responsible development. I've heard economic development goals, vibrancy, additions to the grand list, increase of taxes and jobs, especially for undervalued property, long-term economic benefit, and affordable housing incentives. All of these may be valid criteria, but we had never discussed them amongst ourselves. And so I would be uncomfortable considering the next project until I have a sense of all 5 of us. And I'd like to hear from economic development at P&Z and others as to whether we are focusing on criteria that we can generally agree on, or at least be consistent about. And my fear is without some criteria, this board and its successor boards are going to wind up with incredible inconsistencies in how this policy gets applied. So even though I either made or seconded the motion that's on the table, I don't know that a formal moratorium is exactly what's needed. I think we just need a common understanding amongst the 5 of us that we are going to spend some time figuring out how to evaluate future projects before we evaluate any future project that comes to us.
Why don't we just on our next agenda, put an agenda item that suggests a discussion about this criteria? We're not pausing anything. I mean, these aren't applications that are growing on trees anyway, so. And just have a more robust conversation with your list, Al, and maybe there are others that we come up with privately, and we just have a conversation about it.
And I would
That could be
also
great.
add, and actually a question for Carrie, there's no obligation in this for the board to take up an application. The only thing is it can't be less than 10 days after it's applied, right? Is there any timeline that the board has to act on an application? So if tomorrow an application was submitted, now granted, this would have been something already gone through the planning and zoning approval process. Does the board have to act on it in a certain period of time?
So 2 things I want to be clear. Going to planning and zoning means that they are seeking approval that it is a permitted use in the zone or permitted by special permit, or they get their approvals. It has nothing to do with tax incentives, has nothing to do with tax revenue, right? The planning commission isn't even allowed to consider that. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear that a zoning approval doesn't necessarily equate with economic vibrancy. Okay. Number 2, your policy sets a timeline. You've adopted a policy that says, I believe it's within 10 days that you were.
It says no earlier than 10 days from the commencement of the review process. The request shall be placed on the board's agenda for discussion on possible. This is no earlier than 10 days.
I apologize. I think I read it the first time. I thought it was within 10 days you had to send.
Yeah, that's what I thought too when I read it, and then I realized that actually there's no. So I'm just saying, it does give us a little bit of time here if something did come in that we
Wait a
had an
month if we had
opportunity.
to. or
Yeah,
whatever.
right, so, okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
I
okay,
apologize. I did, when I read it, I thought it had 10 days.
yeah.
Uh,
We
so
would
my-
miss that deadline a long time ago, so.
So,
Okay,
right
good.
now,
So,
there is no
Yeah.
deadline unless somebody were to bring that aberrant petition that I mentioned.
right, okay.
It's unlikely. It's unlikely.
Okay, so in the spirit of that, then I think that we agreed that, so I could withdraw my moratorium motion, right?
Well,
And then we could basically just agree that we will have it as further discussion for this board and get input from the Economic Development Commission for establishing some criteria, right?
Great, yeah.
Right, and I would propose as a path that, we can do a more or less a plain English cover letter that would be on top of this application for an applicant to review that would say, these are the things that we're going
Here's
to
what we're looking
consider.
for, right?
Right, so as our ideas change and evolve over time, that we can modify that. I think, so one of my concerns was if we start to get exclusionary in our language, I guarantee that will be the time somebody comes with a project that we've somehow excluded and go, oh, we really want to do that. Oh, we can't, the policy says we can't. We've tied our
Either
hands.
ties our hands or we're concerned we're too arbitrary.
Right, so.
That's the balance.
So I think that this is one of the situations where we just have to evaluate these projects as they come to us. And rely on the council of the EDC, because they certainly will be taking great interest in it. And then remember that ultimately, we're the middlemen in this decision. The legislative body is a town meeting. And if there's enough interest one way or the other, those residents will make themselves known. So.
Okay, well, I think then, I think we've kind of crafted a path forward on that, so I will withdraw my motion to approve a moratorium on the application of the Madison, Texas end. I just withdraw, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's move
Okay.
on.
All right, we've withdrawn that. But I think it was a really good discussion, and I appreciate everybody's input, and I appreciate, Carrie, your thoughts on it. And I think, we've got a path forward on that. So, and thank you, Ryan, for adding your perspective from the EDC. So we're good to move on to item number 16, which is review draft charge of the ad hoc marijuana legalization advisory committee. Thank you, Jerry.
You're not sticking around for this?
You got some retail space in that building. And so basically, I think what was sent out, Lauren had put together a draft charge, for this is the committee that we talked about wanting to form last week because of the new legislation. And I can put it up on screen, actually.
This is all for discussion.
Yeah, this is discussion tonight. So I think we didn't really get any feedback when we sent it around last week, and I thought, let's talk about it. And we could do another pass of this and then vote to establish the committee at our next meeting. Because then obviously then we have to go through and get. Task force, here we go. Okay, so this is pretty much what was said. I just put it on the PowerPoint slide. But basically it just walks through, all the different elements that we're gonna need to address in this committee because of the new legislation. I know right now we're trying to get some additional guidance. I know CCM has been working on things to advise towns how to address a lot of this. And the idea having this be a broad committee with different facets of the community, to have input, including members of the public. So I guess if there's anything that stands out here that you think is, if it's wordsmithing or refining, we could always do that via email and then vote on it, I think, or do you wanna, is there any highlights you wanna?
So I got a couple of tweaks. One, we didn't time bind this committee to come back to us by a certain date. I think we should consider, since we are on a clock with the state, so we should consider some sort of time frame.
And probably establish it so that now we know that we'll probably do that at our next meeting. So how long do we want the first report?
That's a great question.
Because we gotta also seat the committee, and that takes a while.
Yeah.
So this is not gonna be up and running until September, basically, so would we request that they would come back to us within, by the end of the year?
6 months, right?
I would say.
I went right to 6 months in my head, Scott, so we're thinking about
Versus the end
this.
of the year, because if you do 6 months, we've got a May.
Just before the
Date.
summer.
Well, but the May date is when,
Yeah.
I
The
think.
budget.
No, there's in the legislation, and I had this in there, I had those dates, there's a hard date in May. Is when retail sales start, so, I would think we would wanna have earlier than May, some sort of,
Well, why don't we shoot for 4 months?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
committee may
okay,
Then
throw up
January.
their hands.
okay. Yeah, and then they might come back and say we need more
We
time.
need a little more
and
time.
then, yeah,
Fine,
then-
whatever.
okay, so we'll target like 4 months for the timing, I think that makes sense. 4 months since from the date that they've been seated.
I think in addition to some of the more policy focused conversations, we are also going to have to discern the mood of the town. And I think we probably should provide in here at least a couple of public hearings.
Yeah, I think did this have a public hearing in there?
If it did, I missed it.
That was the other one that talked about it, yes, and we'll, at a minimum, at least one public hearing, probably multiple.
I think multiple,
Yeah.
and then maybe consider some sort of small budget for I don't know, outreach, just to get people engaged in the conversation, whatever that is.
Well, it might be survey work, we might
So,
not, yeah.
right,
right.
Have to
so-
come back to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, come up with what they feel they would wanna do, conduct themselves, just like Island did that, they came back with, we recommended doing a couple things and gave them some funding, okay?
And then it's a large group, it's a large
That's what I
committee.
went- It's 14 if I just counted that with the
Um,
liaisons. It's 10
and-
without the liaisons.
That's the
It's a lot.
complexity of this, though, it
Yeah.
touches on all of these different groups. And then I think, is the Board of Finance relevant? Well, it is relevant in the sense that
There's
we
a
have the
tax
ability,
component.
there's a tax component, so you kind of have to have that. All of these planning and zoning, they've already talked about this and they want to participate in the committee.
Bruce, is there anybody you think shouldn't be on here?
Yeah, no, I got problems, not solutions right now. The only workaround would be to have a core group and then have subcommittees that are working with specific targets and coming back to the core group, but I'm not sure if that's a perfect plan either. I do think,
We haven't done a committee like this in a long time with them. So it's almost a tri-board concept with a lot of membership from different
Yeah.
boards. So maybe this would be productive.
Well, we're doing that, American Rescue Plan is the other one we're talking
Is
about.
it?
yeah,
The-
yeah.
We're
I
doing
do
like a
think-
tri-board thing,
And
so
it works well,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
it's big, yeah.
I do think one of the voices that should be represented, and it could be out of the public group, but
I would say yours.
a contingent that is in the affirmative for this, right? So an advocacy group for this, I think.
So external.
Well, I
Right.
think though, but I think you want a committee though that is going to compromise, so if you have a group that's sole purpose is to achieve one objective, I think that would be hard,
Well, they can
right?
interface with any of those.
Yeah,
advocacy
exactly, those
groups, I
advocacy groups can come and present and make, but if you have a group that like, this is what they
think.
want to
Might
do.
be too narrow
Yeah,
and steer the agenda too much, maybe.
Well, but would they steer it any more than Youth and Family Services, which is already publicly opposed to this? I mean, is there any difference in that? I mean, they've got a well rationed and a well articulated position that,
well, they're making, remember, this is an advisory committee too, so the board will be, I mean, I think that the additional public members, if this is, the two board members that do the interviews from this, if there are candidates there that are advocates for specific things,
So be it.
I think that would be something that you would have to come to an agreement on in terms of recommending them to be on.
I'd hate to make it.
It's not, rather than having a group, I guess is my point, you don't want a group that, as sitting on here.
oh, fair enough, and I
Yeah,
was thinking of one of those three
Right.
members of the
Right.
public,
Yeah,
we
so it sounds like
Right.
you're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
we
Okay.
carve out
Yeah.
for somebody who's
Right.
who's gonna make the intellectual argument that
Right.
this is
Right.
a good thing. I mean, it's ultimately going to be up to a referendum question to decide what we do. Our job is to craft a path and a question to that end. And then, of course, the
I didn't think we had to do a referendum, it could be petitioned to do.
It could just be a policy, I would think, right? We don't have to do a
Yeah, I
referendum
mean,
for a
you could
policy.
petition to have a referendum if you wanted retail sales, but I don't think you have to hold a referendum.
so you're right, we could be mute on the topic. We could not have a
Right.
vote on it and just not say anything about it, which would have the effect of not having anything.
I don't know, I mean, that's gonna get into the nuances as we go into the legislation about what the town is required to do. I wish I had that slide from the previous meeting, but, so I think, okay, well, I guess then this is a good first draft, I'm sure Lauren, right, Lauren, to down, I'm comfortable with your suggestions with, that Bruce has made, and then if other board members wanna make some recommendations about other word changes, then we can send them out to everybody.
Yes.
And then we would just get this finalized for the next meeting. Does
Sounds
that
good.
work? Okay, all right, great. So I'm moving on, number 17, review draft ethics code and determine next steps. So with this, So let me just kind of update a little bit, because I know this has been kind of constantly in the background. We've been talking about this, but not really moved forward yet with the final recommendation. So I asked our new town attorney to basically look at the draft that had been done 10 years ago. And then we had met with Guilford, and there were some things we liked about Guilford. And so I had submitted some suggestions, and we talked about the things we liked in Guilford's code. And I kind of asked her to merge the two. And what came out of the discussion, though, and I will say, Carrie, if she's still available to join us, she has a lot of experience in this area, and started talking about, well, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a policy, or are you looking for an ordinance? And an ordinance puts you kind of in one path, and a policy puts you in another path. And the town's always had the ethics policy, but we had a commission that was referred to, but never really seated. And so usually the commission would be something that would come out of the ordinance. So I wanted her to kind of talk through those nuances so we can pick our path. We have a great draft that she sent to Aaron and I think if we refine this further, now that we know what our path is, we can come up with a final, recommendation on this. So with that, maybe Carrie, if you could just spend a few minutes and kind of educate us on these different paths that we can go down.
Sure. So, as you may or may not know, the general statutes authorize municipalities to create an ethics commission and an ethics code. And it sets forth some very clear powers that are granted to you with respect to that. I will tell you, as I tell all the groups that I lecture on ethics to for CCM, there has been a movement to create a global municipal ethics code across the board that has come up repeatedly over the past decade or more and has never passed. Instead, they sort of had this enabling act that allows you to create ethics boards or commissions and to create an ethics code. There's nothing particularly wrong with having an ethics policy, with the exception that in order to take advantage of the general statutes and the powers that they grant to you and your ethics board or commission, you have to create an ordinance. And so what I had suggested to Peggy was perhaps what we need to do is look at this more as potentially an ordinance as opposed to a simple policy that doesn't have the same teeth that having an ordinance would have. One of the fundamental questions that I was struggling with as I was doing this was I understood that the objective of this town is to make sure that your ethics board is advisory only. In other words, they don't have enforcement powers or punishment powers, but they have the right to give advisory opinions. The problem is that giving advisory opinions is twofold. There are ethics boards that advise as to whether there's a perceived conflict that would prohibit whatever the transaction or participation is. And there are ethics boards that are advisory but still have the ability to go through the process of having a probable cause hearing and then make a recommendation to the appropriate body or agency as to whether they believe there was a violation of your ethics code. So that's a fundamental question that only all of you can answer, whether you only want them to be proscriptive advisory or both, meaning not only do they give advisory opinions before somebody gets in trouble, but they also give advisory opinions based upon a complaint of a violation. And so that's a critical distinction. My understanding was, at least initially, it was the proscriptive form only. And that's what the code that I provided to you really focuses on, is the ability for somebody to come to your ethics board or commission and say, hey, something's come before me. I don't know if it's a problem. Can you let me know whether I've got a conflict?
So,
And-
Karen, so can I, like, and this is in my head, I'm trying to do this, like, I guess, my thought, I feel that it's important that the public has a venue to go to vet concerns, right? So if they feel that something was not handled appropriately or in an unethical way with a town employee or a member of a board or commission, that they had some body to go to. I didn't want to see this body be like a punitive body where they're, putting out punishments, but it was more that they could at least determine whether they thought that the code had been violated. So, to me, just the public acknowledgement that something had happened was the force of the body, right? Not that they would actually, it would be, in my view, the appropriate venue, whether it's a town employee, it would be the town of Madison that would, determine what to do in that case, if a finding is made. Or if it's a board and commission member, then there's another path that you would take, right? But I didn't want the commission itself to be eking out the punishments, right? So does an ordinance give that kind of power to the commission?
Not what I drafted, again,
Okay,
based
okay.
on our discussions.
Right, and maybe that's just, this is my simplistic, and I'd like to hear the board's opinion on this. I don't think we feel like we need this other group to be like, sending out punishments on all these different things. I think we just wanted another group to create a venue to hear these issues and give opinions on them.
Well, Karen,
That was my thought, so.
when you say the alternative is that the commission can make a recommendation about whether there is a violation, can you kind of just like play that out a little bit more about, or give an example of how that would work? Who would they be?
In many municipalities, the ethics board, and I'll say ethics board or commission, however you want to put it, but I'm going to globally say ethics board. There's a process and a procedure. And again, much of it is outlined by statute, which, as I said, in order to adopt those provisions of the statutes and have those protections, it's by ordinance, not by policy. And so what generally in most of the municipalities that I'm aware of that have adopted an actual ethics code and have created an actual ethics board, the ethics board is charged with two functions. The first is to give advisory opinions when something rears its ugly head, so that your public officials can go to this board and say, here's the situation, is there a problem? So they can avoid a problem before it even happens. That's number one. Number two, the ethics boards, again, based on the statutory parameters, are entitled to receive complaints of an ethics code violation. And they go through the process, which again is outlined by ordinance. And you can either allow them to mete out punishment or give an advisory opinion as to whether the code has been violated. So then the next step is it goes to the appropriate board or commission or agency to mete out whatever punishment is appropriate. And again, many towns take the second option I gave you, the one where not only do they give advisory opinions in advance, prospectively, but they also go through the process and determine if there has been a violation and advise whatever appropriate agency or commission as to their findings of whether there has been a violation. And then the steps proceed depending on who the individual is and what their stature and their official capacity is. But again, that's generally done by ordinance, not by policy.
Right. So what we have here is kind of what, we're not allowed, the board is not prescribing the punishment, but they're making recommendations to the venue for the punishment. Punishment is a bad word, but you know what I mean, action to be taken, right? And that's what you included in the draft that you sent to us. It's a policy.
I didn't go as far as all of
Yeah.
all of that, setting forth all of the processes and procedures that are outlined by state law, because again, and maybe we got our wires crossed, Peggy, but
Yeah.
I was under the impression it was to be more of just a straight advisory board, not so much a board that received and processed complaints. But it's very, very easy to amend
Mhm.
the code to provide for all of those extra processes. You should know
Right.
by state law, when a complaint comes in, everything's confidential. There's generally an initial meeting among the board members. They determine whether there's probable cause to send it to a full hearing. And then again, by statute, they're given the ability to call for a hearing, to subpoena witnesses, to investigate, and then to ultimately provide an advisory opinion. And if that's the route that you choose to take, there will be additional questions. For example, we have seen these types of codes, and I'm not trying to discourage, because in most towns they work very well, but in some towns we've seen people abuse them to criticize or harass public officials by filing multiple complaints. So you have issues of what statute of limitations. In other words, can somebody complain about something that happened 3 years ago? How many complaints from the same person are you going to be willing to accept before you feel that there is an abusive process? Those kinds of questions. But again, it's up to this board to determine how far you want this board or commission to be able to go. And then we can review and revise the ordinance to meet those objectives.
So we've been talking about this for a long time, right, as a body. So certainly the spirit of moving forward is how do we get from where we are right now to a workable policy, right? So that's the spirit of the conversation. But Peggy, I just wanted to pick up on the scenario that you described, because I think the policy, for me to get it clear, there's a bunch of different ways it gets used, right? There is the resident who believes that something unethical has happened, right? And I think that was the pathway that you were envisioning, right? And that is certainly one, right? Then there is the I don't know, the employee who has a complaint. Maybe that's handled through HR. I don't know. Maybe the
I
town
think if
employees are.
but I think if it's an ethics, a violation of the code of ethics, that it would get referred to the ethics.
So then so that's another sort of.
And in
pathway.
talking to Deb, and she will be reviewing this next round, and who was our HR director, Carrie, you know, she was more of an advocate, I think, for the ordinance. We had a bit of a talk about it and how it does create more clarity, I guess, in process. And so she's familiar with that and has worked in towns that have that as a process. So how that would interplay with our employees and everything else, we'd have to talk more about so we understand. But that would be a referral, so.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So is there a scenario here that plays out that, I'm kind of the walk before you run kind of person. Would we ever sort of test out this ethics policy before we convert it to an ordinance, just to see kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly about it, and how it's used, and if it's abused, and.
Well, I think I heard Carrie say that you kind of need the ordinance route in order to put into play all of the statutory procedural stuff. Am I saying that right, Carrie?
Yes. Well, so the general statutes require that it either be a charter provision or ordinance
Okay.
to take advantage of the statutes. And so you can create a policy, but it's not going to have teeth. That's the.
But if we don't want it to have teeth, then we don't need an ordinance. Right?
Yes, but then again, the question is.
Why do it?
Well, if it's
Right.
just merely advisory, are you saying that that's
Doesn't have teeth?
synonymous with having teeth or not having teeth or?
So again, if all the ethics board is going to do is going to be prospective on advisory opinions as to whether there's a problem coming up, then, you know, you might as well just have a policy. But if you want to have a board, independent board, that determines whether there has been an ethical violation and advises their respective agencies or, commissions or boards that there has been an ethical violation, I would recommend the ordinance.
I think we want to be able to receive complaints, right? I mean, to me, that
Yeah,
seems like
no, I know,
that's,
but it's
that's
part
the
of
point
it,
of this, why we're
right,
doing it.
so you want there's the ability of the public or, any person to be able to have a venue to go and have these vetted. Because right now, they land in my office or they land in areas that aren't appropriate, they're out there in the public, but they haven't properly been vetted, so it creates a process for the public, I feel like.
So we need an ordinance.
So I guess it sounds like we need ordinance, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and so maybe we spend some time working through the details of that ordinance, and then come back with an ordinance.
Okay, so, that's all great. Carrie, I have a question since we've got you. What is it about this body that we see that magically has the ability to make the determination that there's a conflict or there isn't, or there's a violation or there isn't?
So again, the whole point of this is to have an independent body, something other than all of you decide. I mean, so for example, and I, again, please don't take this as any kind of criticism. What if the complaint was that one of you had done something unethical? And currently, the body charged with making the determinations on, ethics things based on the policy is all of you, right? So, how does somebody feel that they get their due, right? So the point of having an ethics board or commission is to have an independent body made up of people from different political parties who looks at your ethics code, which is part of the adoption process. You've got to look at the code and decide if you're satisfied. And the code is patterned on your policy with some smatterings of Guilford. You have to look at that code and determine whether you agree that that's what your world of ethical violations is going to encompass. And then you have this independent body that, based upon a complaint, looks at the facts and decides first whether there's probable cause to go to the next step. And the probable cause phase is completely confidential. Nobody is allowed to talk about it unless the respondent, the person being accused, forces it to go public. But it's confidential, so nobody is supposed to or has to know about it. And if they find probable cause that your code has been violated, then it goes to a public hearing. And they can investigate and subpoena witnesses. And then they, as a body charged with enforcement of your ethics code, has to make a decision as to whether they believe an ethical violation has occurred based on your code.
So is that public hearing due process, is that part of the state statutes? Is that what you're
That's
referring to?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
And again, if there's no probable cause, and I've been involved in a lot of these complaints, and sometimes, the ones that are abusing the ethics code and the process, they don't get past the probable cause stage. But I think to the point that's been made here, what you're doing is you're saying, we're going to be transparent about this. We're going to have an ethics code that mirrors our policy that's already in existence, and that gives our residents an ability to have an independent board make a determination. A disinterested independent board of effectively peers, right? Make a determination as to whether there's been a violation of the code. And again, yeah.
I'm just interested in your perspective, though. Aaron and I were sort of aside talking here about what would ensure that this would not be political or be perceived as political. I mean, again, an independent body, sure, but again, somebody could put forward multiple complaints potentially.
It's so true, right? There is no perfect world. I wish I could say that nobody ever abuses process, but they do. And that's something, if, you know, if you're amenable to going this route, we can build into the code that says, you know, first of all, you'll have a statute of limitations. So they can't bring a complaint within X period of time of when the quote violation occurred, you know, and you can decide, is that 1 year? What is that? You can also build into the code the notion that the board in their discretion, if they're receiving multiple and repeated complaints from the same individual, that they can make a finding that that the process is being abused, and they're not going to entertain any more complaints from that individual for a period of time, much like the Freedom of Information Commission. They adopted a state statute that does the same thing, that says people who bring multiple Freedom of Information complaints after a period of time can be subject to personal liability. So there are things you can do to try to avoid that. Will somebody abuse it? Never guarantee you they won't, but they could abuse your policy as it's written today too. So
I guess you're never gonna completely get rid of abuse, but.
Yeah. or
Unfortunately not.
Frivolous, you know, FOIA complaints, ethics complaints, we're gonna have to deal with those always, so.
So Gary, in your wandering around the state, have you come across a town that looks sort of like Madison that has a policy that you're really impressed with, or an ordinance that you're really impressed with?
So again, I've been to so many towns, and what I have said, because I do this for CCM, so every time I do an ethics lecture, I pattern it on the ordinance for the host town that I'm speaking at, which currently, because of Zoom, I don't get to go anywhere. I do it all from my my computer. But you know, what I have always said is that there is no one size fits all. And you know, I was used to be in favor of sort of a global municipal policy on ethics, but then I realized, you know, in practice, it's not practical. I live in a very small town. And when you try to describe the familial or personal relationships between people that constitutes a potential conflict in my town, if you drew that too narrowly, you wouldn't be able to fill your boards and commissions. I mean, everybody knows everybody, right? I mean, it's kind of incestuous, right? You get into the bigger cities where you've got tens of thousands of people, and you can be way more selective. So to answer your question, so much of this has to reflect Madison's culture, Madison's size. And to, again, I can say, yes, there are towns that's ordinances are based on, you know, towns of your size, potentially with your scope of commercial businesses, et cetera. But it's never going to be a one size fits all. It's really going to come down to, what do you think is best for your community? And so I'm happy to pull together a draft for all of you based on my experience. But again, at the end of the day, I do ask that all of you look at it very carefully and decide what you think is best for your town, because there is no one size fits all.
Yeah, clearly.
Okay, so with that said, should
Yep.
we kind of just sort of set the draft that we received prior to the meeting aside and let you now rethink that with the input that you've gotten from us tonight?
I think that would make sense. And let me work with Aaron and Peggy to put together a really solid draft that you all can review. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that way, you know, we're sort of focusing the discussion, and then again, you can weigh in once we have something that's a little more
Let's
final.
do it.
Okay,
Let's do it. Let's do it.
all right, good.
Thanks.
The saga continues. Thank you, Carrie.
Well,
So, okay, moving on to item number 18, discuss and take action to approve the American Rescue Plan Round 2 projects and services schedule, total expenditures not to exceed $419,300.
So moved. Second.
Okay, discussion, I think you received a list of projects. All of these were recommended by the long-term recovery committee as, appropriate expenditures. They're more time sensitive in nature, and we wanted to get these projects going. I don't know if there's any specific questions on the list that you received that you wanted to talk about or had questions about.
No, I'm comfortable with the list. I think it's a good list. I would just throw out there, is the board open to considering adding on the American Legion ask, just for what, just that dollar amount that they identified. It's not part of this plan and it's last minute, so I'm not prepared to die on the
I
conversation.
think I'd rather have them come back with a little more details first,
Okay.
as we ask them.
Well, yeah, and that's $100,000.
No, it's 30.
It's
No,
together
they-
from,
They asked for.
They said they're gonna fulfill they're going to finish phase 1.
So they identified $30,000 worth of COVID related losses.
Oh, for the revenue that they have.
Right, and this is COVID spending here. This is not, so their capital expense will probably be dipping into the excess fund balance for.
well, no, I think that we could potentially use American Rescue Plan funds too. I think.
Oh, I'm not against that if we can. I just,
Yeah.
it
Well, and I think that, I think it's worth having them, further detail in terms of how the revenue loss is, but we could certainly do that at another meeting, is add that.
Just
okay,
because it's the same
I
amount.
just figured I'd throw it out there.
Yeah.
And I kind of, the question I have, and it has nothing to do with this particular ask here, or even American Legion, is even when they were presenting to us, is then kind of getting back to the tax incentive program, right? Like, if we don't have criteria, how are we gonna say yes to some nonprofit service organizations and say no to others? So I think that's going to be something we're gonna have to really think about. A lot of those
Fair point.
organizations,
Yeah.
they need, right, they do good work and they need money.
I think that's gonna be part of this charge for the ad hoc ARP funding committee, and, is to try to incorporate that process, that criteria,
Just to be fair.
the scoring system,
Totally.
so I think that would be part of, and maybe that's something we should specify in the charge, which we really didn't do that, so when we get to that item, I would agree with that, because it's amazing how quickly you can build up and find ways to spend this, but I do
And it
think
might
that
be
they,
that if there's a pool allocated to those types of allocations, that it has to be divided fairly.
well,
right?
that's what I had suggested in our last meeting, is that there would be three things. One would be civic organizations, community support, one would be economic development, and then one would be arts and culture, because they've actually presented or requested already that they can handle some of the arts and culture funding. So I think those three buckets, to your point, and part of it is, do you have another outside group be the administrator or not? And, right now, Youth and Family Services is our administrator, right? The paperwork, not paperwork, but the burden of tracking and maintaining to do small grants out for the town could be quite substantial, and we might want to anoint a group that's capable of doing that. So, so I think that those are going to be part of what we would talk about with this, on this committee, about those groups and who would run that and who would select and pick what groups get what. So that's why I think that they should come forward with their revenue losses targeted, and then, would we make them completely whole, or would we do 50% of that? It depends on how much money we want to allocate to that cause, like you said. So, so I don't think we're quite there. If there was an urgent need, though, we could try to fulfill maybe a small amount in our next meeting.
And they didn't they certainly
Yeah.
didn't convey
Yeah.
it as an urgent
Yeah,
thing. It just, we're voting on stuff and.
Right, and I think that they're more than happy to come back and give a lot of details too, so, so with that, I guess, are we all, all in favor of approving the American Rescue Plan Round 2 project, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great, all right, good. Poor Austin, you should have joined remote, you learned your lesson, so, and that gets to the next item on the agenda, which is the,
He resigned at number 20.
yeah, I'm like,
When do you get to?
yeah, when are you,
Where are you?
I'm out,
Yeah. Oh, this one also was your
Yeah.
right, your
You-
projects are right, okay.
I'm sure you didn't wanna talk.
Why you should say something, just once every year.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Austin.
All right, thank you. So the next item is the charge, and so this is a draft, just like we did with the, just like we did with the charge for the marijuana, committee. This one's funny to talk about that, but, discuss ARP funding process and review draft charge for ad hoc ARP funding COVID task force advisory committee. So just for the public's benefit, what we have been doing right now is using our long-term recovery committee to review and prioritize projects, early one-offs that we wanted to get jumpstart the program. I think that the better move forward is to have an actual public committee, and for the board to charge this to be responsible for making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen of how to use the ARP funding. And this is something that's being recommended. You know, originally we talked about just keeping long-term recovery and using that as the venue, then it comes to us, and then it becomes more of a public process. I think that the recommendation that's coming out is that we create this committee first for the first round of recommendation. So this charge, and so this was kind of, Lauren had pulled this together just on different discussions that we had about this on long-term recovery as a proposal. And so any thoughts on, you know, I think we could certainly tighten up the charge language. And then we'll talk a little bit about the composition of this, because one of the things is some of the committees that has worked well for us were the tri-board committee. And then also CIP, and CIP actually though, has 2 members from each board sit on it, and you have 1 Republican and 1 Democrat, so you have a bipartisan lens onto each board, or from each board onto the committee. So one thought is, at least for the major elected boards, is to expand this a little bit and try to model it off of CIP or when we did the tri-board committee. So I opened it up for discussion.
I think that you're onto something there. I think if you wanted to do the 2, 2, and 2, and have, not the same, not necessarily the same 2, because they're both looking at us like deer in the headlights.
What are we doing?
Hot.
You're not assigning us to something, are you?
Those 6 serve as the core group, and the other interests then come with what they think are projects that should be considered.
Versus having, I would still argue we would have 1 from each of these other commissions, like economic development, senior services, they would be seated members of the board and voting members.
But then why not CRC, or why not Public Works, or?
No, but these
That's
are, no, I'm talking about the
town
commission.
employees.
No town employees would be seated.
That's on the right.
Those are just staff liaisons on the right,
Okay,
so.
so, well, the CRC then, because there's a big storm coastal management impact component to the money as well. So that's why I'm erring on the side of a smaller core group with these resources to it, much like CIP is.
Right. So basically mirror CIP, because CIP basically has the 3 boards with 2 members,
I'd
and
be fine
then,
with that.
is that it? And then we have public members.
2, 2, and
We
2.
do have, but they're non-voting public
Yeah.
members, so.
I think that we should have voting public members for this, I really do. I just feel like we need to, because otherwise, I mean, all these boards are gonna be voting on this anyway, right? This is a recommending body.
Right.
So I think to not have any other voice on boards that are actually gonna vote on this anyways, it seems like almost duplicative, so that's why I feel like it'd be a little bit more of an expanded group.
I like this idea of the 2, 2, and 2 from the elected boards though, and maybe the other ones are like additional members or something. Because then the board gets too big too. I mean, you're never gonna get it done. So 2, 2, and 2, and then 3 public. I don't know. I kind of like that.
Just doing the 3 elected boards and then.
And the rest can be additional members or something like that they can provide somebody.
You give them voting rights? Yeah.
I was thinking no, but
think it's hard to invite somebody onto a board and then say,
You're just a
come to
liaison.
meetings, but you don't get a vote.
Right.
You're just a liaison.
That's
Yeah,
a tough ask.
right.
People
And
do it, CIP, some people are very vocal.
they are, but I feel like it's tough to get people to do that.
Yeah.
For CIP.
Well, just to move us along, the idea on the table is two representatives from the three elected boards and one representative from the other boards. Is that what you were?
No,
So that's what
I was proposing in the alternative to this structure, two representatives from three boards, and then all of these other perspectives are resources to it. So Youth and Family Services would be coming to that group of six with their recommendations on.
I feel like the legislation identifies certain areas that the funds are supposed to be used for. And so we identify like economic development, that's one of the specified reasons for the legislation.
So they should.
Then we have social services, that's another, so I feel like that's kind of a way to overcome that issue of, well, how can we have someone from this commission, but we don't have someone from that? I mean, to have two people from the Board of Education, I don't see why that, doesn't seem to me to be necessary. And if you're gonna eliminate economic development, you're gonna eliminate some of those other ones that are even family.
I just think it
Yeah.
helps from a
Yeah.
partisan standpoint to
Yeah.
be nonpartisan. I guess it balances,
It's
Tends to
more,
balance it
yeah,
out a
it's
little bit.
it's kind of, it's
muting the
trying,
politics.
and it's also, it's something that is functioning well. But like Tri-Board had two Board of Ed,
Yeah,
two.
it worked very well.
Right, and
Same with
two
CIP.
Board of Ed.
Well, so maybe we answer the question this way. Do we expect to use any of this 5.3 million on a school project?
We know. I don't
And
know.
I don't know.
I can't say that.
Yeah,
So we've talked very peripherally around emergency shelters and so would we be looking to have the schools,
HVAC projects.
have the schools do an emergency shelter component to their development? And would we be looking to chip in? If we don't see a natural spend in the district, in the school district for these funds,
HVAC. You know, I
but
mean.
that would be, that would be.
No, I'm just saying there might be some modifications or things, I don't know yet, I mean, we haven't gone through the projects, and then it also, obviously, we have a referendum that's gonna if the referendum, say, didn't pass in February, we might try to use it to make some improvements in air quality in the schools, there's going to be air quality investment needs, right? And then if it fails a referendum, it's gonna have to go into CIP. So there could be $1 million or $2 million we might wanna spend on that. I'm just throwing it out there, so
there are
yeah,
projects
right.
that would plausibly qualify for these
Yeah.
funds in the school district,
right,
if we chose.
right. So that's why I think that and it's also about, community impact, children have been one of the targeted groups in this, right? So, well, through social services, but also educationally, they're spending some of their money on programming, but other towns are doing a lot of educational programming using these funds. So I'm not saying,
Through the schools or through another organization? Who's providing it?
well, that's, I think it's a mixture. I think it's a mixture. Our school district is offering programming now with the funding they received directly. The question is, can there be additional things that the town would fund? Once again, I'm not advocating for that, I'm just highlighting that those
Sure,
might be
sure,
part of
sure.
the discussion, so.
So I think, back to my point,
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the size of that committee.
I would agree
And
with that.
so my solution was to cut it down to 6,
2 from each board.
2 from each board.
And then the public.
And then, I guess if I don't know what voice those 3 members would be representing. I don't know.
Well, then the question becomes I mean, arguably, the people that sit on Youth and Family Services are members of the public, right? They're appointed to a board and commission, but we're not having staff members and we're not having, right, so,
So maybe we do that, so maybe we get rid of those 3 additional members of the public because the assumption is the rest of those board members are members of the public. Not to mention, we are all members of the public, by the way, too.
Yeah, we don't count.
I like having the other commission people on there.
Mhm.
I think it's important. I think if they add a totally different voice, a different perspective.
So we're at 9 without the 3 at the bottom.
Right.
I'd be okay with that.
Well, what about the coastal resiliency component of it?
Well, they will come and make a pitch to this.
To the
be
board.
Yeah, exactly, to this, to be part of the plan, and then the board always has the opportunity to, expand on that. This is just a recommended body.
You could say, why isn't the conservation
Right.
commission there? Why isn't the?
Yeah,
This is an unwieldy size,
Yeah.
and yet, if we have to err on one side of being either overly inclusive or overly exclusive, I would argue we have to err on the side of including more viewpoints rather than fewer. And Bruce, I agree with you, it's sort of an unwieldy size, but in this case, I would rather err on including too many than including too few, so. I don't disagree with you, but this is dividing up a pie. And people aren't seated at the table. The process can really get bogged down. So I sort of
Yeah.
like the notion of 2 from each of the 3 elected boards and
and then keeping the 3
including
commissions.
these folks.
And then get rid, so the last line, we're gonna get rid of. That's it. 3 additional members, right?
And so that would be 39.
So it's not.
The list of, okay, so switching gears, the list of staff liaisons, is that meant to be, if you're not on the list, you're not part of it, or?
I didn't think it was
Would-
just a suggestion.
So maybe
you
staff
should-
liaisons as
Yeah.
needed?
So maybe just,
Yeah, and maybe we don't designate specifically say you have to have, I mean,
To include or something.
I would argue that probably if we're gonna have one person, just like, Stacy is for CIP, and as a director of finance, this is, a lot of money, and so she's gonna have to be a core part of making sure the plan, that everything's handled appropriately, the documentation, she's gonna be responsible for all the auditing.
Make sure we don't spend the money twice?
Yeah.
What about like beach and rec?
Peggy, are you looking
Yeah.
for
The director.
a motion or?
I don't think
Well,
we're.
no, we're
no,
not, so this
okay.
is discussion, so
Okay.
what, we'll take this back, so now that we have some time to think about it some more, revised draft will go out, we can mull it over, and then ideally we wanna take action on something for our next meeting for this, okay?
Okay.
And then we can just think about it a little bit more too, thinking what's worked well, and what has not worked so well in the past too. Okay, so we'll move on to, number 20, appointments and resignations. Can I get a motion to approve Billy Budd from, of the resignation of Billy Budd from the Library Building Expansion Committee? And Tony Davis from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Is that a resignation? I don't have a packet with me. Did Tony Davis? was a
Yes, yes,
resignation, Right, yeah, okay, that's what I
yes.
thought, resignation, okay.
So I'll move that with, our gratitude, for both of their service. Certainly Billy has, been a tireless, worker on the library extension building committee, so. good for
Yeah,
him.
no, thank you for all the hard work, and I will say he was, that was one of the most successful, I think, building committees the town has ever had. They've done a phenomenal job, and so.
I'm taking credit for picking that whole committee.
We will, we thank them for their service.
Those names, Andy.
All right, moving on to item number 21.
No.
Tax rate.
There wasn't one in the
I don't think I
package.
saw it, right. Lauren, citizens' comments.
I know Scott Cochran was hanging
Cochran
on.
is
He's
his
here. He's here.
Okay.
He wanted to talk earlier.
All right,
You're up, Scott.
Can you hear me?
We can.
yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, just, I wanted just to mention, you accepted, and I thank you to accept the grant for the Summer Youth Employment Program. But I did want to take the opportunity to thank the businesses that have been partnering with us to provide those sites. And those businesses include the Town Campus Learning Center, the Branford Community Dining Room, the Guilford Yacht Club, What's Cooking in Madison, and the Arts Barn. So we just want to thank our partners for joining us with on this grant to provide work sites for our participants. I just want to make sure I had an opportunity to do that publicly.
Okay, great. I'm
That's
sorry.
all. Thank you.
You hung out all this time since we voted on your. So
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your persistence. So I pretty much appreciate it. And
No
yeah,
worries. Thank you all and have a good night.
okay.
Thanks, Scott. You.
Okay, so item number 23, that's it for citizens' comments, right, Lauren? And there's no one in the room. So I guess I would like to make a motion to move into executive session and invite in Lauren Rhymes, Ryan Duquesne if he's available, and Deb Millardo.
Peggy Carey's also still on. Are we asking Carrie to come in, or do you want me to have her?
No, I don't think we need her for this part of the discussion, but thank you, Carrie, for all your help tonight. And
All right, give me just one moment then to get everything off recording.
okay, wait, can we vote on this, please? Moving to.
Yep.
So moved.
Okay, all right, all in favor? Aye. Okay, great. We're going to, for the public's benefit, which is very few on here or at all, we're moving to the executive session.